Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder. So today we will enjoy a little bit of nice gameplay in the HMS Southampton, and I want to talk about the upcoming patch, because not just only has Gaijin announced some nice cruiser additions to the gameplay, or to the game in general, one for each nation, and there is obviously then the USS Atlanta, then also for the Germans the heavy cruiser the Admiral Hipper, then for the Soviets the Chapayev, which was announced today, then also the HMS Arethusa for the British, and then also the Mogami, the IJN Mogami for the Japanese in the 10 8-inch gun layout version. So this is adding a lot of flavor in terms of cruisers again, a little bit of gap fillers here, a little bit of nice additions there. Nothing wrong with the fourth wave of cruisers so far, but I could be wrong. We have absolute certainty only when the patch drops, and when I have played through all of them, then I can give you an absolute verdict. Those are just some realistic expectations of mine, and I think that they are mostly driven by experience. But also, some additional news have been made public in the preliminary patch notes that Gaijin has provided us when the dev servers came out. I sadly didn't have the chance to test the stuff on the dev server. I was either very tired or just didn't have time outright, or I wasn't near the PC when the dev server was announced, because the same old issues are the same, that I just get too short notice of the dev server happening. And if I would get notice, I don't know, a day ahead, I could plan so. And I think a lot of you guys have missed my views on this stuff. When it comes to jets, I think disaster is inevitable. Those jets at 10.0 are an absolute joke in my opinion. Then when it comes to tanks, China is interesting, as it unites various different tank design philosophies in one tech tree. And if you think that a lot of those tanks will be problematic, then don't worry, because those tanks are already a problem when being provided on the battlefield throughout different nations, mostly American and Soviet. So with that out of the way, let's now concentrate on the amazing stuff that I have to talk about, and this is the preliminary patch notes. You will obviously find a link in the video description down below where you can read through this by yourself, but a lot of changes are made, and I will talk about them in more detail in just a moment. But many changes are there that are absolutely mandatory, in my opinion, for making naval forces work, because I think a lot of captains have abandoned their ships and the research progress because they just couldn't stand the broken stuff that was there. And amongst all the broken stuff, one thing stood out, and this is amazing to read. Here we go. Ellipses of shells falling in salvos has been fixed for 100 to 203mm cannons. According to available historical data, ellipses of scatter have been greatly reduced. Different cannons will use different presets, which will give a wider or more elongated ellipse at different ranges. In general, the aiming in longer range has become more effective. Now this is huge. I don't know if you realize how huge the potential impact of this can be. Just let me bring you a little bit into the picture. And I have tested this, I have made videos about this, I have given feedback to Gaijin, and I was driven already insane by what was apparently the lack of acknowledgement by Gaijin for this being a problem. I made a comparison where I shot with the Frunze and also the T-22, aka the Type 1939 torpedo boat from the Germans, which have 102 and 105mm guns respectively, where I could just repeatedly and very reliably bring in the shells on target with insane accuracy. We were talking here about a dispersion that was less than the gun emplacements on the ship where it was fired from, at ranges in excess of 5 kilometers. I think with very good aim and very good just firing solutions, you could hit with ease a target at 10 kilometers. and that was in stark contrast to bigger guns like the 5-inch region, especially the American 127mm, then the same for the Japanese, then the German 128mm, and also for the Soviets with the 130mm, where they had very good horizontal dispersion but extremely disastrous vertical dispersion. So we were talking about a dispersion that was at 5 kilometers, over 10 times the length of the enemy's ship length. So that was just absolutely horrible. You just simply couldn't hit the inside of a barn, and that was just absolutely insane. And I think if Gaijin does fix this properly, which is a big if as far as I know Gaijin, then this could bring back people in enjoying naval forces. There are still massive issues with the grind, the balance, the waiting time, the map design, etc. But this is one of the big issues that I always had with naval forces since I came across this as being an issue, the dispersion. And if Gaijin really addresses this correctly, then this could bring more people back into War Thunder's naval forces. Therefore, we have more players, we have more things to shoot, less spots, and therefore also more fun overall. And if Gaijin then addresses the rest of this, then we also can enjoy naval forces much more. Yes, I know there is a lot of opinion and personal preference in there, but it just tilts me if I shoot at stuff and I have correctly let the enemy target, I have correctly established the range, and it's just dispersion that constantly screws me over, and then the enemy just sits in a ship with smaller guns that can repeatedly hit me and just force me into this endless repair cycling of stopping flooding, stopping fires or extinguishing fires while my crew goes down, while I have a longer reload, gun emplacements get knocked out, the repair time, the flooding, the deflooding time, pumping out the water, those times get insane, like 5-6 minutes, and that's just not fun. That's deeply frustrating, and I think that was also addressed. We'll have to see how this translates into the gameplay. But in addition to the new content that brings a little bit of variety to the gameplay, which I will talk about in just a moment, this is another chance. I never doubted that Gaijin can make naval forces fun. I was always frustrated with the fact that they seemingly don't care about this. And we had funny things like the dispersion on the HMS Dido is still not fixed. I hope that this as well gets addressed with the next patch. And we had the HMS ZS Leander, which was just so obviously broken, which has been addressed, but not the HMS Dido, which suffers from the same problem, like the majority of big gun destroyers. So again, I hope that this really goes into the direction as it was announced on the preliminary dev blog or dev server updates. And so let's talk about the ships at hand, and let's see how they will fill a few gaps here and there. So let's quickly talk about the ships at hand, and let's discuss what they will bring new to the nation. Let's begin with the USS Atlanta, and while the Americans never had really any shortage of firepower, the first two ships were a little bit overshadowed, shall I say, by the appearance of the German and the Soviet cruisers. And with the USS Brooklyn, they still have one of, if not the strongest ships in naval forces, and the USS Atlanta will be an absolute nightmare because of the sheer volume of shells, which is practically a USS Somers and USS Sumner stripped together for the volume of a single broadside, and then even the volume of AP. While the single shell might not be devastating, the sheer number of them, knocking out guns, knocking out the propulsion, killing crew, setting the ship on fire, causing flooding, etc., just dumping it into the endless repair cycle. So the USS Atlanta definitely to watch out for. Then we have the Admiral Hipper for the Germans, and that will be the first German ship with guns greater than 5.9 inches. So it then plays with the big boys, and we have to see how its armor layout works, how the DPM is, how effective the shells are, how good the accuracy is, how that all works together, and that also versus the other new ships and versus the old ships. So we still have to then talk also about the game modes and the map layout later on. Then we have the HMS Arethusa, and that is a little bit of a step backwards from the ship that I'm kind of playing right at the moment, just presenting half the amount of guns, and that is something that I don't really think was absolutely necessary. And if the HMS Dido will be fixed, I think the HMS Dido will be better than the HMS Arethusa when it comes to killing ships. Then we have to talk obviously about the Chapayev, and the Chapayev is then again very similar to the ship that is there at hand, the USS South, the USS, oh my god, the HMS Southampton, when it comes to the amount of guns, but way better secondaries, patrol boat capabilities, and anti-ship capabilities. So that is anti-plane capabilities, shall I say. So how again it works out with the armor layout, with the DPM, with the effectiveness of the shells, with the accuracy, has to be seen. But I think it is then a healthy intermediate between the ships with the 180mm guns and then also with the Krasny Kafkas with its 130mm guns. So that is a healthy intermediate that was kind of long overdue for the Soviets, because either they were overpowered or they were underpowered, but they were not just right there where they should be in terms of balance. And last but definitely not least is the Mogami in the 5 twin 8-inch gun turret layout. So that is very interesting. If you look at it, very interesting how it will fare against the Admiral Hipper versus then also the USS Brooklyn, where I think it will dominate that ship, and also then versus the other 8-gun ships in War Thunder, which there are not that many of this point. So I think that those ships will really deliver more variety into those tech trees, and it opens up more diversity, which I am a fan of. So then let's talk about the rest of the patch notes. So as I stated with some screenshots right in the beginning, or at the beginning, that Gaijin makes numerous fixes to various different patrol boats, destroyers and cruisers, making them usable, with the biggest changing being obviously the overhaul of the accuracy for 100 to 203mm guns, which is very important, and I'm delighted to hear this. But the next thing was, before those screenshots, there was also a mentioning of new game modes, enduring confrontation in particular, and we have various different completely new scenarios, and I am very interested to check them out. I'm very interested in experiencing the new game feel for myself, and those changes, those new additions, be it with new content of new ships and also with new maps and new game modes and fixing existing stuff, can be the turning point for naval forces for the better one. It is pretty shocking that it took Gaijin that long, make no mistake about this, but as it is the saying, better late than never, and I cannot wait for trying it out myself. And I think many more, let's say, disasters will come to us this patch. If you look at the top tier jets, if you look at tanks, then yeah, disasters are inevitably incoming. But the problem will not be China, for instance, as I stated in my last video. I think China is a chance, and if you see those tanks being added being a problem, then tough, because they're already in the game, most of them. And I think very much a decompression patch still is desperately needed. We still need desperately matchmaker overhaul and map design overhaul, and new game modes for tanks and planes. But for ships, I think this is the ship patch. I'm looking forward to it. It still can be a massive disappointment, but I still believe and I hope that this will be good. It can be a disaster, make no mistake, and if this will be a disaster, you can be sure that I will not leave Gaijin alone, that I will much make a video about this with the expected words included. So this is the moment where I have hope. This is the moment where I can see this very much succeeding, and where then a lot of problems like the lack of players, the lack of targets, the lack of people in the queue, and the bots being necessary to fill the matches will be then a problem of the past if players then enjoy the game, which was my point all along. And again, many of those points that get fixed I have previously addressed. So there is the small possibility that somebody with a brain at Gaijin is watching my videos. And yeah, that keeps me also going, making YouTube videos with constructive criticism and critiquing the game, if you will. And with the result at hand, 7 kill assists, 7 kills, a lot of damage. That's a good match. That is what I want to see more of. That's it for me today. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Why not give it a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know as usual in the comment section what you think about this. And we'll see each other on the battlefields, in the skies, and on the waves of War Thunder.